I wasn't so much the fish. In those days, there was mussels everywhere. Everywhere there was mussels. I used to get my mussels from round the corner. I was a great believer in Whitey liked the mussels from that area. And occasionally I'd ask in the pub and get a few mussels for them. And I'd pick them up and Bluey would take them up the pub. And I'd come home and go. And then in the afternoon I'd go back to poor old Bluey would have no fish, no mussels. I'd eat them right out. Mussel juice all over the pub floor. Those are the days of 6 o'clock closing, the good old days. But mussels were so plentiful. I can honestly say I never sold the fish, I give them away, plus the mussels. I've had a few free drinks on it, but I've never asked for money. Yeah, make a bit of home brew one time. In the bait box, that was partially frozen. And the home brew would be made, and then to overcome the cloudiness of the beer, we'd put the beer in the bait box, sunny side up. And when we pull the beer out, the bottom of the bottle would freeze all the brown rubbish on the bottom, and if you pour gently, you got clear beer. And the bottles were washed, put upside a special rack made for them. Definitely 10% it was. Quite a time. When I first took over, Keepers had the shed. Before Keeper was Tatchell. Between then there was a couple of guys came up and took the shed. But I can't quite remember that one. But I do remember coming in with a dinghy one day and there was a motorboat nearly on the wall. And I took his anchor and dropped it to the weather's side and he pulled himself out. That was one of Unk's boats, and that's how I first got to know Unk. I never fished round here that much. I never used to come round here that much then, only before the war when I was a kid. After the war, I didn't come round here much at all for the first 3 or 4 years, but I still knew all the ground. After the war, I spearfished it. Spear fishing was in, and I used to go on a lot of these inshore reefs spearfishing. They come quite renowned. The Chow's Reef, the Inner Reef, around the corner reef, the Buoy, that was 10, 11 feet of water. And as I got older, I give that away and concentrated more on the fishing. The Keepers had a shed down at Bowie, and then they took this shed over. To take a shed over in this area, bathing box or otherwise, you had to be a ratepayer. So what he'd done, he'd bought the house in Bamfield Street, so it was possible for him to run this shed, which he'd done for right through till after the war. And till after the war. And then my father used to come down and manage the shed. That was before Tatchell's had it. So I was more or less, my whole life, young life, was centred around this area, this shed. Even later in years. How much things have changed in this area is unbelievable. You could say that this place is international. They come down here sailboarding, windsurfing, and it's every weekend. It's nothing to see schools and multicultural people come in to go sailboarding. I spent quite a lot of time. That's all behind me now. Most of it, I put it behind me.
World War II.
But I do remember vividly during the war, they talk about greenies and what have you now. I always said in the last few years that the true greenies were up in New Guinea. People might smile when you say these things, but we had a bit to do with natives from time to time on the barge, off the barge. And I can always remember shown by a native Tabona. You couldn't take a native from one island and put him on another island. You had to pick up a native on that island. You couldn't take a native out of his... Tabonas respected all these laws, and he knew the laws of the villages. And we had a great habit of going to shore with hand grenades. Get the dinghy, go out and bomb fish. Well, you could imagine 400 or 500 troops in an area all got the same idea. They'd soon bomb the reef to Kingdom Come. And I always found at Tabonas, I'd say, well, we had fish. Okay, and he'd take me to an area well away from the village. Why you do this? I asked him, why you do this? Ah, you bugger up. You bugger up, fisher, village. You go for long way. He taught me lots of things. He taught me what greedy means to those people. You know, after I give a lot of, I smile at myself when you hear people carry on now. Of course, things have changed now to what they were. But I can always remember him walking with him through the bush to a village for information or for food. He could tell you before you got to the village how many people were in the village by the size of the path. He was our interpreter when we got there. And before we got there, you'd look around, trees, and he'd look at a tree, and I'd say, oh, you stop, look at a tree. And he always said to me, I belong to you, look at nothing. And I didn't understand what, look at nothing. He said, I belong to me, I look at him. He said, him you got possum, him you got honey, you got bird. True. He'd look at the tree. And he'd give me a lot of thought for what now they accept as a greenie. He was a greenie. They were the original greenies. And I always took a lot of note of what he said. I was only a young fella then. And I always said, if this bloke ever gets the bloody wind up, that's when I pack up. After the war, I couldn't run very well. I could swim, but my legs were gone after the war, and so I resolved myself to fishing. I was in the Life Saving Club. I'm a life member down there, but when I started to fish, I started to look for places where were known as the Chinaman's Reef, Yorkie's Reef, the Brighton Hole, the Brighton Reef, and when it was too windy to go around the corner in the north wind, that's mean when it was too windy to go around the corner and go south, I was always told by my father to go north, keep the harbour open. And I'd go north and fish, and I found quite a lot of spots up in up Hampton, off the beach of Hampton. Good spots, and fished during the day even. And they were places I picked. As I got older, I come to realise I found out more about the reef up north. But I fished Yorkies for a long time. But I don't go around the corner now. It's a long way around, and it's being too chancy for me. Yeah, all the bathing boxes, they were good days. I look upon them as good days. All the bathing boxes were here. Ratepayers own the bathing boxes. Families go down for tea. 6 o'clock closing. Dad'd get off the train. Dad'd get changed, come down the beach, sit with Mum and the kids. And they'd stay there till sundown.
So you'd sit here with your wife and your kids?
No, and the boys would go up and pick up the boil water for the tea, come down. And that was quite a common thing. Right along the other beaches standing around the corner, there was nothing to see 7 or 8 families around you. And
so even then it was a meeting place and a social place for all of them?
It was quite a social place. And we'd stay there till sunset. And we'd move home. Family after family would come down. We got to know families. Kids got to know kids. Different now. You go down there now, no one knows anybody. But in those days, the bathing boxes really drew families down. They could change, and there was a dressing shed then. It was about the middle, but it didn't stay open that long.
And do you think, Baz, that it's still nice to see all the people coming down here to...
It's very, what I see now, I come down here, it's a place of relaxation. That's the Sandringham Beach. And there's nothing to see schools come down here, kids learning sailboarding. And then again, this shed is really international. When I say international, it's quite nice to see Asians and continental people come down here to go sailboarding. And that's quite changed.